bees and bows and beehive thrones and farm and herb garden we grow. Learning how they live we know, very little but still explore. How it could have been before, of times long past, of peace and war, of crafts and bills to ancient lore, discovering here at Jarrow Hall.
Hello and welcome to the Jarrow Hall Podcast. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
And today we also have with us Dr. Eric Cambridge, and it's such a pleasure to have you today.
Hello. Thanks for coming, Eric.
Sure.
So Eric is the chairman of the Friends of the World of Bede, which is, I wouldn't say an academic charity, but it's got a lot of academics in it. And the Friends support the site here at Jarrow Hall, and also I think it's fair to say there's an interest in supporting the churches at St. Peter and Paul's.
Absolutely right, yes, because our remit as a charity is a bit wider than the museum, though it's obviously a major focus of our work.
Absolutely. So you've been the chairman of the Friends for a couple of years now, and you replaced the founder of both the Friends and the museum here, Dame Rosemary Cramp.
That's right, yes. Who taught me many years ago.
And yeah, because from what I understand, before she became an archaeologist, Rosemary Cramp taught Old English.
That's absolutely right. She started in Oxford in the mid-1950s, early 1950s actually, as an Old English language specialist. And it's easy to forget that, of course, there wasn't really such a thing as early medieval archaeology in the early 1950s for her to teach, though in her own time, I mean, she'd been fascinated by it for years from her undergraduate days in Oxford. And her B.Lit thesis was an early and landmark attempt to relate archaeology and Old English texts, because it was on the archaeological vocabulary to do with buildings in Brúnwulf. So wow. She was trying to work out, what the meaning of the Old English was by reference to recent archaeological investigations.
It's fascinating, and I mean, I think we knew Rosemary a little bit when we started volunteering here, but that was very much towards the end of her life. But was she always sort of focused on being an archaeologist? Was that her ambition when she went into academia?
Not quite, I think. She was always fascinated by it, and when she was appointed to a lectureship in Durham in 1955, her remit was just every aspect of Anglo-Saxon culture, so not just the Old English texts, but the whole material culture side of it as well.
So she had a broad canvas to work with.
Absolutely colossally broad remit, a daunting prospect. But of course, coming as she did from south into Northumbria, where on the doorstep were not only internationally famous sites, but also, of course, a huge collection of carved stones, which are much more common in the north than in the southern areas of England. And the greatest collection of that is in the dormitory in Durham, so that was on her doorstep for teaching purposes. And that's really, I think, how she started to apply the interest she'd already developed as an undergraduate in Oxford, just as a member of the University Archaeological Society, and a keen amateur digger, and had started to think seriously that it might be part of her career.
And of course, I mean, she's best known today for the excavations that she carried out at the monastery of Wearmouth Jarrow, which began in 1960 or thereabouts?
50s, I think.
50s.
Up in Wearmouth, and Jarrow came a bit later. But yes, absolutely right. She started in the English department, but then transferred to be the only other member of the archaeology department in Durham besides Eric Burley. So there literally were just two of them to begin with in a hut in the courtyard of Hatfield College. And of course, as part of that once she was actually teaching archaeology, she really needed to find a training dig for her pupils to go on, because that's obviously an important side of
Absolutely.
of the academic training. And I think Monk-Wearmouth came up on a very small scale in the 1950s because there was slum clearance around the church. And so,
So that was the catalyst, really, for the excavations happening.
it was. And when it first started, on a very small and rather amateur scale compared to how it all worked out later.
We like small scale and amateur here, don't we?
Well, to the extent that some of her diggers went over from Durham to Monk-Wearmouth on the bus, clutching their buckets and trowels and shovels, and they were digging, in the backyards of still occupied houses. So that every so often elderly ladies would sort of wobble across these holes where their backyards had been to go to their outside loos and back. But typically, she developed a really strong relationship with the local community, and that was an aspect of the way she worked, which carried on really throughout her archaeological career. So she got them on her side at quite an early stage.
Which I guess is something that just happened naturally through sheer force of personality, because she was a big character.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we only remember her, as I say, it was at the very end of her life, but even when she came on site, you knew Rosemary was about by everyone else's reaction.
Yes, I think that's absolutely
that.
right.
Yeah. She's caused quite a lot of influence and landed with quite a big legacy as well, hasn't she? 'Cause
Absolutely.
there's so many people I know now who they're just massively affected by all of the work and things like that's gone on through the excavations, through this museum opening.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh, you volunteer at Jarrow Hall?" Or my mum or my uncle was a student of Rosemary Cramp's, and it's just a natural talking point. And there aren't many academics or archaeologists that that aren't really in the public eye who have that kind of legacy, I think.
Yes, I think that's right. And I think it would also be fair to say that though she always needed the digs to be training digs for her students, she never lost sight of the broader context of needing to involve the public in archaeology and realising that if you didn't support amateur local specialists in it, archaeology would never really function. Archaeology, to an extent, still does depend on the interested amateur, and she was always very open to inviting people with an interest, and not only just by encountering them on her site, but also remember in her earlier days when her teaching load in the department was lighter, she ran a whole series of evening classes, and a lot of people who came to work on the digs came into archaeology through going to Rosemary's evening classes. And she was an inspiring lecturer. So, it's not difficult to see how significant numbers of converts, as it were, came to dig through, having been inspired by Rosemary's lectures for the Workers' Education Association and other such bodies. So she recruited quite a lot from there.
From those extra activities. Yeah. And I guess, as you say, as a discipline, archaeology does rely on the enthusiastic amateur. I mean, all of the big finds that you hear about, quite often metal detectorists are involved to begin with, and then the county archaeologist and the professionals get called in from there.
That's absolutely right. I think it is still true now, though in that different way, because there wasn't such a thing as metal detectoring, of course, then. But nevertheless, though the ways in which it happens have changed, the extent to which we are still dependent on enthusiastic and interested amateurs finding things, reporting things. And when you think about the sheer extent of the landscape, if you don't have local people with that sort of interest who are really close to the ground and would pick things up which otherwise are going to be missed by professionals because they're covering broad territories.
And they're wearing a lot of hats as well, I imagine, when they're running a dig.
Absolutely right, yeah.
Somebody else might have the time to go for a ponder, walk the dog, something like that.
Exactly.
You just never know. They look at the ground in a different way, from a different perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And just knowing your patch very well so that you spot anomalies or maybe things that have been ploughed up, glinting in the sunlight, and you spot some glazed pottery or something like that, or a coin, is really important. Still to this day, I think. And famously, of course, she not only converted people who already were interested enough to sign up for her classes, but she kind of took on and won round, the youth of Jarrow when she came to dig at Jarrow, who I think she saw very clearly that they either had to be for her or against her. They were either going to jump over the fences of the dig during the night and vandalise it, or they were going to support it. So in the end, she persuaded them like a body of little vigilantes to come and actually protect the site when she wasn't actually on site. And so that, they were...
That's inspired, really.
It was very clever, I think.
I've got some stories my mum told us. She used to play hooky from school to go down and watch the digs, and they would have family days out to go watch them excavate.
Safe to confess now.
Yeah, and then of course that interest kind of spilled down onto me, and then now my daughter is absolutely fascinated with archaeology. I've took her to a couple of little digs. There was one in Ripon I took her to, and just since then she's been like, I want to look for treasure. Come away with a couple of little beads and things, It was nice.
Yeah. No, it was an important part of what she did, and I think she never lost sight of that broader picture that actually, because ultimately, apart from the practicalities of running a dig, the brutal fact is that if archaeology is ever to be publicly funded, you need to explain to enough people why it's important to understand their past, and that it's worth spending public money to increase knowledge of it. So I think she was always very sensitive to the political realities as well as the strategic realities of running the dig.
And the commercial interests that surround a lot of the excavations.
Indeed so, yeah.
And I think, we mentioned it on the first episode of this podcast. Obviously, it was fantastic that she launched the excavations at Wearmouth and Jarrow as a training ground for students. And obviously, the finds from those digs are a big part of our collection here. But the fact that she was able to write up and publish everything that she found, that doesn't happen with all... certainly at the time she was digging, it's rare for such a comprehensive study to be published, where we know pretty much which parts of the site have been looked at, which haven't. And I can think of, Iona as an example where that maybe hasn't taken place in the past, and
other people are having to do it now.
Yeah, and they don't know if has this been dug already, or is it is it a clean patch to investigate?
You're quite right about that, and I think it's one aspect of her having had such a long and active life, because actually she was so busy when she was teaching up to, she retired at 60, that she published actually very little in those years. But we were all just very fortunate that she then had a long and active retirement. And she was writing things still, into her very late 80s. So she had nearly another 30 years of productive life, during which time she was able to write up, with the help of, obviously, of assistants, all her excavations. And she took a great personal pride in being able to say that at the end of her life she had published absolutely every hole she'd ever dug in the ground anywhere. And believe me, there are very few archaeologists who can say that. Most of them literally still have skeletons in the cupboard which they haven't written up. So that was a great achievement, I think, that she was able to see it all through.
And, absolutely, but I suppose as well, the construction of this museum and the experimental buildings here that I dare say would have taken place during her retirement as well, for the most part.
Yes, it started just before she retired, in terms of planning, I think. I mean, the museum, like most things Rosemary ever touched, just grew from tiny origins to an enormous enterprise. I can very dimly remember the first display in Jarrow Hall. And actually, it should be said that another of her achievements, though it was incidental really to the dig, was rescuing Jarrow Hall, which was, really part of the corporation work yard and in a state of near ruination when she took it over. And there aren't so many historic buildings in Jarrow, so actually rescuing a handsome late 18th century house and giving it a new purpose was a great achievement in itself, I think. But it started, the exhibition of the finds from the dig started in just one room downstairs, where part of where the cafe is now, and then
The hive.
expanded by the late 1970s into two rooms, so she could split up the early medieval and the later medieval exhibits. And though it was quite small in terms of area, that it packed a lot of punch, that exhibition. It was really fantastically good. And of course, the model, which you can still see in the museum today, was commissioned as part of that expanded display.
St. Paul's.
The model of the Anglo-Saxon monastery, and was a great centerpiece to it. So that was a high point in the late 70s. But she'd always, I think, had an eye to expanding it more, because she realised at a time when not that many people were thinking about it in terms of what it would do for medieval archaeology, that some of the experimental techniques which were already being adopted by prehistorians, could also be of use to medieval archaeologists in terms of reconstructing buildings and thinking about early agricultural techniques and that sort of thing. So the museum really was born out of a desire to expand not just what could be displayed, but to expand the kind of research potential of the museum, because you learn such a lot by attempting to reconstruct a building which only exists from post holes in the ground, or by working out exactly how, say, an early medieval plough would have been used, by actually hitching it up to a bullock and trying to produce some furrows. So that, there are all sorts of things you can only learn archaeologically by doing that sort of exercise. And her colleague then in Newcastle, Archaeology Department, Peter Fowler, was already very interested in that side of archaeology. So they teamed up effectively to...
and we're sitting in the result, I suppose.
We're sitting in the result, absolutely right, yes, which, it's not only very interesting for archaeologists to go through these exercises and find out what works and what doesn't, but also in terms of communicating the importance of archaeological results to the public, showing someone a plan of a set of post holes in the ground is really not very exciting. It has to be, however much you try and dress it up, but showing people a building based on inferences from those post holes in the ground really can fire their imaginations. So
it's much more immersive, isn't it?
It is. It's absolutely important to show people what the archaeological results actually mean by going the full hog and reconstructing the buildings they're evidence for. So I think she was very far-sighted in that. And in my view, though she's left an enormous archaeological legacy in all sorts of different ways, but perhaps the most enduring and imaginative in many ways is this museum, I think, which is a great vision.
And I think it was, at the time it was built, it was one of very few experimental archaeological sites in the UK.
I think that's absolutely right.
Certainly in this area.
Yes, certainly in the north. I think you're right. I mean, there'd been one or two attempts elsewhere, Weststow in Suffolk, for instance, but they were different in that they were trying to reconstruct a specific site. I mean,
Yes.
just to show what the dig in a particular place might have meant in terms of how the buildings work. Whereas here, what she was trying to do was something much bigger than that, which was to collect together buildings that had been excavated on a range of different sites
Across Northumbria.
And which had different functions, and to put them beside one another just to show the range of building technologies
types,
available at the time. So in that sense, describe, and that answers one major problem of communicating early medieval archaeology to the public, because if you're dealing with the later Middle Ages, you start to have surviving standing buildings in numbers. You can take people and show them, whereas particularly with secular buildings, there are obviously some Anglo-Saxon churches, I mean, including St. Paul's here, but there just aren't such things as secular buildings. You can show them. So it's an important exercise to show what the Northumbria Bede was brought up in might actually have physically looked like.
Yeah. And I guess there are, we've mentioned before that when you just have post holes in the ground, it's a bit like trying to imagine what someone looked like based on finding their footprints on the beach. There are all sorts of, you might have a rough idea of the size of the person and their weight, but you have no idea what they look like. And everything we've done here with the windows, the finish on structural columns, the fact that we've gone for quite a rustic interpretation.
Blank canvas, isn't it?
It's a blank canvas, but it could well have been far more ornate and elaborately decorated than we've gone for here. But
We have got plans to finish it, haven't we, to decorate it. And
we do, and if I'm not mistaken, you recently were on a course in early medieval painting, is that right? Or Iron Age?
It was Iron Age, but the same sort of recipes and things like that we use. So,
At the
that
Avalon
was-
Centre.
It was Avalon Archaeology with Archaeological. It was fascinating.
Yeah,
Can't wait to
Caroline,
get stuck back in.
and start painting this place once we finish
Yeah,
redorbing.
absolutely.
Because Caroline from Archaeological was an excellent, well, I guess you would describe her as an experimental archaeologist.
Yeah, she specialises in earth buildings, paint pigments. She does a bit of thatching. So she taught us daub here, and I sadly missed her paint workshop because I was in Somerset at the time when she was doing a paint workshop here, and this time I went to Somerset again to go and catch up on
That's commitment. That is quite a drive to go to a paint workshop.
It was worth it.
I'm glad you did. But one of the things that she mentioned, and I guess it's borne by what we found when we've been redaubing this place, is that the type of daubing mixture can vary, and the best binding material is manure rather than clay. If you want something to stick to the walls and not have any cracks.
She describes that the clay is like the glue
Yes.
that holds together the fibres and the aggregate. So you need like the three different things.
Mm-hmm. And it's full of that already, whereas with clay, it's just...
The fibre makes it more flexible,
Mm-hmm.
and the aggregate gives it a good solid strength. Yeah.
So...
But we have, on one of the panels, we've got some experiments that we did on daub, because each time you do a mix, you need to experiment and see how much you need of what, because every clay is different, every horse is different.
Absolutely.
The sand that you use might be different. I'm really inspired by the way she promotes trying things out and experimenting and things like that.
That's
So
got to be what
I
it's all
suppose the
about,
same
really.
sort of thing happened when the place was first built.
I can't remember specifically what problems they had with the first daub they used. I think they were much more concerned about just making the structure stand up at
Yeah.
wall. And actually, the recent refurbishment has done one very useful thing, which they rather shirked didn't shirk, but I mean were reluctant to do when the building was first erected, and that is the raking shores on the outside have been reinstated, or at least a number of them have. And I think they were unsure when it was first dug whether they were primary or secondary, but subsequent excavations elsewhere have found similar things where they clearly are part of the initial design of the building, so they are structural to brace
The raking
to
boards.
brace the wall.
See, I thought that they were added later, like the building had been constructed,
Yeah.
and then as it's weakened over time, they were added as an extra support. That's what I'd learned and understood. But that's an interesting
Yeah. Well,
thought as well.
Yeah, it certainly has caused people to rethink how these buildings actually stood up just by finding others where, if you find one or two that have got raking shawls, that might be secondary propping. But if you then find a lot of buildings that seem to be constructed like that, and you can't see any chronological difference in the in the post-old.
One thing I was going to say, just in case anyone watching is unfamiliar with what we mean when we talk about raking posts, it's the sort of cross-diagonal posts that are aligned with the vertical posts that keep the building upright. So the soil properties then as now mean that the posts deteriorate quite quickly below ground.
And do on this site, especially.
They certainly do on this site, yeah. And it's largely the weight of the walls that keeps the structure square. But the raking posts are an important support, and they take some of that stress away and just keep everything kind of solid and contained. And it's in itself, it's an interesting piece of experimental archaeology to recreate that. I mean, we've added the raking posts 30 years later, as you say, but more recent excavations have shown that this was probably an original feature when halls like this were built.
So we've been talking for quite a while now. I think it's time to pass on to our good friend Brúnwulf, who is an absolute expert at Old English as well as other languages. And I think today's got a very interesting poem to share with us.
Related to what we've been talking about, yes.
Yeah.
So I guess we should let him introduce it and give a talk about that. But take it away, Brúnwulf.
The Rim of the Rood. It was an Anglo-Saxon poem, but was Dame Rosemary Cramp's favourite poem. It's truly unique in its depiction of a Christ crucifixion on a bejewelled and magnificent golden cross, as told by the vision of a protagonist. In this dream that he experiences, he sees the cross and it speaks to him, and the cross itself is seen as having its own suffering. It is also depicted as being a thane, which served Christ as if he was a Germanic warlord, and this thane suffered for his lord and underwent a great deal of suffering alongside him on his behalf. And this shows the Germanic warrior worldview that has been Christianized and reinterpreted and re-shown through this particular structure that it represents. But also it depicts a lot of pre-Christian heathen elements in there as well, including the crucifixion of Christ depicted on a gallows tree, very much like Woden would have been, as seen in Norse analogies, but also depictions of Woden on the gallows that are told in other Anglo-Saxon poems. But also there's a particular quote, "Way up earlier shaft," which is all creation wept. And that seems to reflect a similar analogy to Balder and his death, and that all creation swore an oath to protect him, but also wept at his tragic loss. Part of the poem may be dated to the 8th century, and as I would say maybe as early as that, as seen by the Ruthwell cross, of which our cross here at Jarrow is based on. This Ruthwell cross has a runic engraving of a section from this poem and matches up with it perfectly, although it is in the Northumbrian script and Northumbrian dialect. I'll read a few sections from this poem so you can see how much of a wonderful poem it was and why Rosemary Cramp would have enjoyed it so much. What it swef na kust sejan wille. What mi je merta te midra nichte sit an reod bear an the rest of wunodon. Thucht me that it je sawa silish the treo. An luft leed an lecht be wunden, be me biochtost, that beken was. Bioten mid golde, jime stodon, fairer at fordum shetum, swulche there fit weron. Open on them exlia spenne, beholden there, angel drucht na fele.
Fera thor forth geschäft, ne was de huro flakkadas jelge, at hina therby heldon, halliga gastes. Men of a molden, en eil theos mera geschäft. Silich was a seabim, en ich sunum fach, forwundor mit womum. Je ser ich wunders treo, wedum je werthud, wunum shenan, je jerad, mit golde, jimes hafton, berien werthliche. Weldendus treo, Hwetrich thur that gold on jurten mechte, emre eir je win, that hit erest on gan, sweter on that thruthren helfe. Eilich was mit sochem je drefed, vochtich was, for thera feiren je suchte. Je serich at fusse beken, wend en wedem en bleom, huilem hit was, mit wetum bestemmed, beswoeled mit swartes gange, huilem mid sinker je yerward. And that just shows the cross covered in jewels and gold, but also stemmed with blood, pouring with the blood and the suffering of Christ. Another section, which also appears on the Ruthwell cross, is this. Fela ich on thambioge, je beden hebben, ratha werde, je ser ich werde God, fela thenian, thustra haftan, berien mit wolknum. Wellendes hrau. Scher na shemam scherdo forth joda, wan on the walknum, way up eil shaft. Quithston kuninges ful, Christ was on the rode, hwatra their fussa feran quoman to tham athelinge, each that eil beheld. Sara ich was mid sochem je drefed, chnar ich hwerla tham sejum de hander mod elne muchle. Je namon he their al michniel God, a hof on hier of them hefian witter, for let on me tha hilderinkas, stand on streme bedrithena, eilich was mid strelem for wundod. So in this particular last line, we see eilich was mid strelem for wundod. I was all with arrows for wounded. And again, along with the way up Aelia shafts, this possibly hints at Baldur's death when he was shot at with arrows, as analogous in Beowulf, but also in the Norse depictions where he's killed with a spear of mistletoe. But these kinds of syncretism between pagan and Christian shows how useful a poem like this would have been for conversion, but also how these poetic tropes would have been reappropriated and reused for Christian poetry. Thank you.
That's really wonderful. Thank you very much, Brúnwulf. So we put a pitch out for some questions, and we've got a couple. And we've got one off Rachel. So she's just watched episode 3 of the podcast. It was great, really inspiring and interesting. The stuff Joe is doing sounds amazing. A question I was wondering about was, did people travel much for work or trade in early Anglo-Saxon times? And has any archaeological DNA research been done in the local area to see where people who died here may have originated from?
Well, I guess that's 2 questions, really, isn't it? Did people travel much for work or trade?
Trade, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about trading centres in this particular area, but certainly for pilgrimages as well, that would have been a very common reason for travel. I know some of the recent excavations at Lindisfarne, they've found a lot of skeletons from quite a wide area, because it was the place you went if you were sick and you wanted to get healed, and so there would have been a lot of sickly people travelling from great distances to go to see St Cuthbert's relics at Lindisfarne in the early Anglo-Saxon periods for healing. As for work, I guess it depends really what kind of work you were involved with. I suspect if you were an agricultural labourer, you probably stayed in the same same place you'd lived in your whole life. But if you had a particular trade, you'd go where the work is.
Yeah, maybe some people travelled with the seasons the same way that some people do now.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Going and offering their help and services.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's It's a good question, but I guess it's quite a broad one, and the answer just has to be yes. As for
Probably.
probably, yeah. Isotope analysis. I don't think. I mean, they did find a lot of skeletons in the excavations at Wearmouth Jarrow, but I don't think any of that kind of analysis has been done. I suspect the technology wasn't available at the time.
I think that's probably right, yeah.
Yeah, but certainly the Bamborough Research Project have been looking in detail at the bones that have been found at the Royal Site of Bamborough, and they found that some of the people there came from further afield, from southwest Scotland or the west coast of Scotland, where of course the kingdom of Dalriada was, which was where St. Oswald and his siblings spent their exile before coming back to Northumbria. So yeah, certainly check out the Bamborough Research Project's page if you'd like to learn more about that.
Okay, so the next question we've got from Rachel again. Did they find any human remains during Rosemary Cramp's dig? If so, were they investigated for the cause of death, fluorine and teeth to locate where they were from? Did they have any ideas where the tannery might have been, if there was one? Oh, there's a few questions in the same comment. And do you know where the original path of the river was? So let's start with the first one.
So yeah, we've addressed the skeletons being found.
Yeah, including, of course, an early pre-monastery cemetery on a slightly different, the graves on a slightly different alignment to the ones of the monastery. So that whatever community it was attached to, there was something on this site before the monks came in the 680s, which is interesting. I don't know how much work it was possible to do on processing the human remains at the date at which they were found and the work, the post-excavation work was done. And I think there are probably now modern procedures you could do which weren't done because the technology wasn't available at the time they were excavated. So maybe, with resources, there might be still more to find out from the human remains at Jarrow.
So if any of that leftover funding money is around in years 2 or 3 of our dig, we could find out when this pre-monastic cemetery dated from.
Yeah.
That would be exciting.
It would be. I'd be very interested to find out.
The tannery, that's there must have been a tannery, I suppose.
Must have been.
Because especially they needed the vellum to produce the manuscripts, so they've been raising calves for slaughter, and there must have been a site where all that processing work was done.
And yes, and all sorts of leather artifacts, one imagines.
Yeah.
And of course for binding books.
Yeah,
well.
as you mentioned, the leather cover of the St. Cuthbert's Gospel is very intricately bound.
We don't know where it was, so far as I'm aware, and that's one of the many unanswered questions about the site. It must have been a major industrial activity on the site, but it remains unlocated, so that's all to play for if
am I right?
Going to be more excavations.
We might find it this summer.
We might.
Am I right in thinking they found the scriptorium when they were doing the original excavations?
Well, they certainly found remains of styluses and so on, but it's a problematic question, that, because it's not clear to what extent the scriptorium was, a physical room in the early Middle Ages. So I don't know that they ever really could tie it to a specific space.
Yes, I suppose it would be quite a big ask to build a specific building just for producing manuscripts in at that time, when you could just take your styluses and...
I mean, there is one marked on the plan of St. Gallen, the early 9th century plan of an ideal monastery produced on the continent. But it's a big question as to how far that ideal was ever realised in terms of purpose-built structures. So I think the answer is strictly no, we don't really know precisely where they actually sat and wrote all this amazing, these amazing products of their...
well, thank you. I'm sorry for adding another question on the questions we've already received, but that was interesting.
That's what happens, though, isn't it? You land down a rabbit hole.
You do. You fall down a rabbit hole.
So the last one, do you know where the original path of the river was?
Has the path of the river changed?
Oh, well, we'll know that Nissan built on the slack.
Which is they're still there now. I don't think the path of the River Don has changed drastically, because the bank is so steep. If anything, the bank might have gotten slightly deeper over time, but I'm not sure of there being a huge change in the direction of the Tyne or the River Don. Taking a wider view, I know that the River Team, which is a stream running through Gateshead where Team Valley is, originally the River Tyne and Wear joined together to form a super river that went through Team Valley. But I'm not aware of any changes in the last 1,000 years or so that have majorly impacted the course of the River Tyne.
There's usually a natural change in the way that rivers flow anyways, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean,
So
obviously...
there's bound to have been some.
The River Tyne was very heavily dredged in the 19th century. It was quite a shallow river. Used to have like Kings Meadow Island in Newcastle, which was a big island in the Tyne. More locally, we had a really extensive sandbanks, the Herd Sands and South Shields, which made navigating the mouth of the river very dangerous because you had to veer quite close to the Black Middens on the north side to get in. But I don't know about big changes to the course of the River Tyne or the River Don, if I'm honest. I think they're pretty much where they were.
I thought they'd moved the River Don, didn't they?
Maybe. I mean,
quite recently.
It might be something we need to take away and look at.
Yeah, certainly there were revetments found at the southern limit of the excavations done between the 60s and 80s, which were clearly to keep the river channel contained. What we don't know, I suppose, not least because it all disappeared under a Nissan car park, is exactly what the archaeology of Jarrow Slake was like. In other words, the area where the Don actually turns and joins the Tyne. And it's possible that the channel changed over time just in that last bit where it's actually debouching into the river. But sadly, there wasn't any excavation where that happened. It all just disappeared under concrete. So that was that.
It's upsetting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take
Imagine
that.
what could have been.
Could have been fun. We'll take that one away, though. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Any more questions, or
No, that's
us?
That was it.
Excellent. Well, I guess we should do a bit of promotional work with the Friends of the World of Bede, because we are coming to the time of year when the autumn lecture series will be announced.
Yes, every year we try to, we do succeed in putting on a series of public lectures on various aspects of the early Middle Ages. If you join the Friends, they're free, and if you are a member of the public just wanting to come to a particular lecture, if they're held in the museum, you'd have to pay the museum entrance fee, but there's no specific charge for coming to the lecture. And we're putting on 4 lectures this coming autumn, which is about the normal number we try to do. One of them this year will be held in Durham and not in the museum at Jarrow, but we'll put all the details of where they are and what they're about on our website so that you can put them in your diary if you'd like to come, and we greatly welcome your presence if you'd like to come and support them.
I'll certainly be there. And if anyone is interested in joining the Friends of the World of Bede, it's a great organisation to get involved with. You get a chance to do a lot of stuff here at Jarrow Hall, and as Eric said, there'll be lectures further afield as well. But we'll have a link to the Facebook page and the website for the Friends of the World of Bede in the comments here. And yes, I think if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask us about what we've talked about today, please leave a message. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And thank you very much, Eric Cambridge, Dr. Eric Cambridge, for joining us today and being so generous with your time.
Thank you very much. It's been fascinating,
It has.
as always.
Pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for watching.
Yeah, thanks all.
Or listening.
Or listening,
I do forget, because we've got cameras, I do forget that some people just listen.
Indeed. And I suppose next time we see you, we'll be talking about our ongoing excavation here at Jarrow. Thanks all. Goodbye.